But it's like you don't go into an apartment where no one knows you're coming with a loaded gun and then get to claim later, oh, it was heat of passion. No, you had a plan. You followed through with your plan. You brought the loaded gun and you immediately fired it.
Welcome to Crime News Insider. This is Jorge Del Portillo, and with me as always is Lori Hoff. How you doing, Lori?
Jorge, I've missed you.
I've missed you too. Look, we're doing another episode.
I know, finally.
This is a darn good one too.
We're on the opposite ends of the world, I feel like.
Yes, exactly. Now I'm working downtown San Diego. Lori is back in North County of San Diego, so this is good.
It is good.
Yes. So today, as the title says, we're doing another trial episode to highlight the good work of our deputy district attorneys. On May 29th, 2024, 32-year-old Ali Abulaban was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder for the murders of Anna Abulaban and Rayburn Barron. This was a brutal, tragic murder stemming from domestic violence, and the defendant, Abulaban, seemingly had it all. He was this TikTok star. He was a social media star named Jin Kid, and he had over 1 million followers. But this trial obviously received a lot of publicity and was prosecuted by our very own Deputy District Attorney Taryn Brast of the San Diego DA's office. And with us to talk about this case is Taryn Brast. Taryn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jorge and Lori.
You know, it's coming up on 16 years since all three of us were hired together. I don't know if you know that.
Feels longer sometimes.
Doesn't it?
Best hiring class.
I think so.
Not biased or anything.
It's so nice to have you on, Taryn. This is
you.
a really sad, horrible case, but a really interesting case to talk about, I think, for a podcast.
Yes, we've talked about domestic violence. We had Ben Barlow on to talk about that. And now this case is a domestic violence case. Very tragic. As we said, it was 2 murders. Taryn, can you give our listeners just a brief overview of the facts of this case?
Sure. So Anna Abulaban and the defendant, Ali Abulaban, were married. They had met in Japan. There was domestic violence almost from the beginning. They ultimately had a daughter. Things started to unravel. Anna was unhappy in the marriage, not only because of the violence, but the jealousy and the controlling nature of Ali Abulaban. You know, he was using drugs and there were a lot of other factors, but ultimately she separated from him in September at some point, over a month before the murders. So she had called the police September 8th, reporting a domestic violence incident. There were a couple other ones in September. There was one incident where Ali Abulaban basically put a live broadcast on social media while Anna was calling 911 to report his violent conduct. And he was mocking her and cursing at her and essentially blaming her like it was her fault that she was calling police to report him. So at some point that month, Anna moved out of their apartment. She started staying with her friend, with their daughter, and she would go back and forth, either forgiving Ali Abulaban or meeting up with him for the sake of their child, but ultimately essentially ended their marriage in September. This was after she found out that he had a sexual encounter with another woman. Hmm. So he was very jealous. He would often accuse her of cheating on him, yet he was the one who went out and was with another woman. Anna found out about it through the woman, and Ali admitted it to her. And so ultimately she said, there's no coming back from this. It's over. You know, she had moved out. He was still living in the apartment. He would often message her, try to get back with her. And it was a love-hate sort of relationship where he would be nice to her, tell her how much he loved her and wanted to get back with her. And then he would curse at her and degrade her and demean her and things like that. And this was over text message or over the phone or in person. So there was a lot of information we learned through his social media, through both of their social media and both of their phones, highlighting all of this violence and the toxic relationship. So at the end of September, Anna starts moving on with Ray Barron.
And they were already separated at this point.
They were already separated. So they had been separated earlier in September. They were not living together. And she had basically told him, and this was confirmed over text message, she told him, it's over. I don't want to be with you anymore. I can't get over this. There's no coming back from him being with another woman. And also it was more just, she just wasn't happy with him. He was violent, he was controlling, and she didn't want that anymore in her life. So starting in October, we found evidence of various statements that he would make and websites that he would look at. So starting October 1st, he had sent a message to one of his cousins that I found Anna, I saw Anna with another man, I'll kill him, I'll beat him up, those kinds of statements. And so already 3 weeks prior, he had already been thinking about what I would do if I ever found my wife with another man. So then he would start to look at various websites about listening to a room remotely, or essentially how to bug a phone and how to bug a room. And he was researching really ways to stalk his wife. He was also in a couple days prior to the murders researching decapitated heads and chopped bodies, things that most people don't look at. Even the morning of the murders, he was researching trash cans. Well, he's living in a hotel at the time, and they're in an apartment. He doesn't need a gigantic trash can. So there was a lot of things that he was thinking about prior to the murders. So 3 days prior, this was October 18th, 2021, the defendant, Ali Abulaban, moved out of their apartment in Spire, San Diego. It's in the East Village area of San Diego.
The downtown area, for the people that don't know, it's like a high-rise building in the east part of downtown San Diego.
Correct.
Okay.
It was a fancier, newer building. Views of the water, very nice. And so they lived on the 35th floor. Ultimately, they agreed that she and their daughter would move back into the apartment and Ali would move out. Anna did not know that Ali still had a key card to the apartment. She thought he turned everything in. He gave her one of the keys that he had, but he kept that copy. So he was essentially able to enter the apartment and spy on Anna whenever he wanted. So the morning of the murders, October 21st, he entered the apartment using the key card after Anna left to take her daughter to school. So he enters the apartment. No one's in there. He had food delivered and flowers and a pumpkin, trying to make a nice gesture to Anna. So he sees all the items still there. He sees the flowers crushed. He sees that she's not there. And he starts to trash the apartment. He throws the pumpkin on the ground, shattering it, throws the flowers everywhere. He's rifling through a lot of clothing and papers in their office. And he's recording this at the time. So it's on his cell phone. So we can hear him, essentially trashing everything.
He's recording himself alone in the apartment, trashing the apartment.
Yes.
Okay.
He made a lot of recordings on his phone, a lot of audio recordings of conversations with Anna and just different things like that. So he started the recording before he even entered the apartment, minutes prior. So he's on the elevator, riding it up, and he records his whole time in the apartment. And you just hear him, you hear him ransacking the apartment. Then he leaves and he calls Anna on her cell phone from the hallway of the building. Now, police were able to find a Nest camera that was facing the hallway leading up to the apartment. So you can see the defendant, Ali, walking down the hallway corridor, going into the elevator lobby, and kind of back and forth. So we hear this conversation that he has with Anna, where he's, again, accusing her of being with another man. Where are you? Who are you with? You're lying to me. You're cheating on me, all those sorts of things. And so he's irate. This is about 9:45 in the morning. Ultimately, he leaves the building. He goes back to his hotel. He claims that he's taken a nap. But the most important thing that he did when he entered the apartment was he activated this application called Discord on their daughter's iPad that was in the apartment. So he activated this. It was already on the iPad, but this was one of the ways that he was looking up about how to essentially bug the apartment. So he activates this application. He hides the iPad behind the master bed on a charger and then leaves the apartment. He has some sort of application on his phone where he's able to listen to the live conversations coming from the apartment. So he's at his hotel room. Claims he's listening to the apartment. And ultimately about 2 p.m., he hears Anna come back to the apartment with another man. Claims he doesn't know who it is at the time, but obviously knows that she's with another man. And then he said he left the hotel and drove to the apartment. And he parks outside the parking garage. And then he runs down the parking ramp. This was different than how he entered the apartment on any other occasion or even the morning of. And so he's running down the ramp. There's surveillance cameras in the parking garage and in the elevators. So you see him running down the parking ramp. He runs back up. He probably forgot the key card to the apartment. So he runs back up. He runs to his car, then back down the ramp, and then he gets onto the elevator. So then we see him at that point. He's on the elevator, but we can see his demeanor the whole elevator ride. He's calm. Again, the gun's hidden. It's in his jeans underneath the sweatshirt. And he doesn't even wait for the door to open before he runs off. And then that's the last of the video from the elevator. But then we turn to the Nest camera. So the Nest camera then picks him up, running from the elevator bank down the hallway. And then he has to turn the corner and there's another short hallway to run down before he enters the apartment. So you hear that the door opens and it's literally a second later where you hear the gun racking and then you hear the shots fired. The gun racking is harder to hear on the Nest. However, you hear it. He's also separately audio recording this.
Right.
So at 2:53, he starts an audio recording on his phone, which is in his pocket because we can't see it on the video. Again, a second later, you hear a clink. Like he's racking the gun, and then you hear a clink of what to me sounds like an object falling to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You hear Anna inside, screaming. She's saying something to him, and then he doesn't say anything. He immediately then racks the gun and fires one shot. And then a second or two later, he racks the gun again, and then he fires 4 more shots. They're about a second apart. And then there's a couple second break. He racks the gun again, and then he fires the last shot. Again, you can hear all of this. The racking is very clear on his audio recording. And then he returns to the door, opens it. Then he screams Anna's name, and then his audio recording, he shuts it off.
Wow.
So but the Nest camera then is still, you can still see him. Then he goes back down the hallway to the elevator, and then he calls his mom at 3:02 p.m. He calls his mom and he's like, I just shot Anna. I killed her. I shot her in the head. She's dead. Things like that. So he's admitting that to his mom, and you can hear his mom in the background screaming. You can't hear anything else she says, but you can see now we have surveillance video from the elevator ride down, and you could see on his cell phone when he's standing next to the neighbor, he's looking at a photo, and it looks like the photo he took of the bodies. Mm-hmm. So what we later learned through looking through his cell phone was that he took a photo of the bodies probably about 30 seconds after he killed them.
Yes.
They're on the couch. They were on the couch the whole time. Both Ray and Anna were on the couch. And you see the photo that he took where Anna's head is slumped into Ray's lap, and they're obviously both already deceased. So a couple minutes after he left the building, he calls 911. He's calm at first. He says, I found my wife, and another man. They have a couple bullets to the head. And he's talking more to the dispatcher. Ultimately, he starts to cry and say, "Oh, so horrible," finding them. And then the dispatcher tells him, stay there. But then he hangs up.
He's calling 911 to seemingly report finding two people deceased in his former apartment. But he just confessed to his mom, but he's not confessing to the 911 operator.
Right. He's not confessing. So to me, after we see, we get all these recordings, he's obviously starting to build his defense.
Right.
So he doesn't want to admit what he just did. And he left. He sends a couple text messages to his parents and his friend of the photo of the dead bodies. Then
he shared that photo to other people.
He shared that, and pretty much immediately.
Huh. So let's that has a lot to take in. Obviously, this trial went on for a long time. There's a lot of details, and the timeline is very important. You said, he's trying to build his defense. When you get a case like this, what are you thinking the defense is going to be?
Well, I pretty much knew that they were going with the heat of passion defense.
And what is heat of passion for our listeners?
It's a defense where you're going for voluntary manslaughter instead of murder. So the defense has to prove that the defendant was provoked and that he acted rashly, and that an average person would not have acted as rashly in the same manner as he did. And so, you think of the heat of passion typically as, like a man walking in and his wife is sleeping with somebody else, and he just is so overcome with emotion that he kills her or him or both. And so that was a big thing for me to overcome. I was thinking a lot of jurors would probably kind of know that scenario, have heard that phrase before.
I mean, that's the classic scenario, right, Lori? I mean, Lori's done a bunch of murder trials, and the few that I've done, I've used that scenario to distinguish a premeditated murder from a heat of passion. The classic heat of passion, you walk in on your spouse with another person, right, Lori? Have you said that before?
Yeah, I think that is probably what most people think of. And then I think, Taryn, your challenge in this case was saying it's not quite that simple. This was, as you've already kind of laid it out, it wasn't that he was surprised by this. He knew exactly, what was going on, versus just someone coming in and unexpectedly finding your wife or your husband, in a situation that you did not expect to find them in. And so let's talk about the trial, because I think that it played out in a really interesting way. And for those that want to go back and watch it on YouTube, it's on Court TV, which is so cool now that we can sort of go back and look and see, because the defendant took the stand, right? We can look at what he said and what he didn't say. And I thought your cross was really fantastic. But he was a challenge, I would say.
Have you ever dealt with someone like that? For people that haven't seen it, I mean, he was aggressive, argumentative. Did you expect that from him?
So I knew he would testify. I knew that he wanted to tell his story. And, he's also a good actor. He did a lot of impersonations of various characters, and he was good at it. And so I knew that he would, first of all, that he would be calm for the most part, especially on direct, that he would be calm, that he would, tell his story in an emotional way, that he would cry and, try to make the jury feel sorry for him, that he was so devastated by his wife, who he loved so much, was cheating on him and found her with another man. And so it was obviously important to me to make sure that the jury saw his true colors. So it was just important to me on cross to highlight multiple different things. First of all, to highlight his violent character and nature, because you weren't going to see that on direct. And
you're allowed to do that in this type of case, a domestic violence case.
Right. And a lot of it had already come out through Anna's friends and through photographs of Anna's injuries on their cell phones. And just it came out a lot already in other ways. Also, he did a recording. He recorded one of their dinners together where he ultimately punched her in the face afterwards in the parking lot. And you heard that on the recording. So I had already gotten in a lot of this information about his violence and his admissions to being violent with her. It was also important to highlight his dishonest character and various times that he has lied either to other people, lies that were found on his phone or social media or under oath or to the psychologist during testing and things like that. So I made sure to highlight that so that the jury didn't believe his testimony. It was also, I wanted to make sure that I, confronted him in ways where he was, again, going to show who he was. He was a DV guy. That's who he was. And so, again, he paints himself as the victim who was so betrayed by his wife, yet he was the one who was violent and controlling and demeaning to her. And she had every right to leave him, which is what she did. Another thing that was important on cross was to highlight all of the premeditation. So getting him to admit that he made these statements about wanting to kill any man he found Anna with, or, all of his website searches and everything like that to show that he did all those things. And of course, he had an explanation for everything. And some of them were completely unreasonable. But I just made sure to highlight that and highlight all of his planning and his deliberate, willful choices.
Yeah, I noticed that you carefully walk through all the choices he made and all the choices he didn't make. For example, you said, you made the decision to bring the gun. You wanted revenge, whatever he says. Okay. He said, I wanted closure. You did an excellent thing of like having a litany of leading questions where the question is a statement followed by, is that correct? So for example, you made the decision to bring a gun, correct? And then you ask, did at any point you tell yourself, oh, I shouldn't be driving to the apartment right now? That's an open-ended question. I like that dynamic. Did you plan? You wrote obviously your cross-examination, but did you plan for that to occur? Like this giant list of leading questions followed up with a question like that?
I did. I made sure to hit him with all of the things, again, all of the choices, because that's important for the first degree murder. Proving it is all his choices he made before, during, and after the murders to show that all of his choices were willful, deliberate. It wasn't a result of mental impairment, drug intoxication, or any of the other things I knew that they were going to use as defenses. I wanted to make sure I made him highlight, you chose to do this, you chose to do this, you chose to do this. And so that's why I brought him through all that. And that's what he did. I mean, he made the decision to go into the apartment to bug it. He made the decision to arm himself and load his gun before he entered the apartment. Like he could have at any point, like he had time to cool off. He had an entire car ride where he could have done a number of different things, which is what I asked him. You could have gone to a bar. You could have gone to your parent, called your parents. You could have gone to a friend's house. You could have gone to work. You could have, you didn't do any of those things. No, you made the decision to keep going, keep driving to the apartment, knowing that you had a loaded gun and, over 100 rounds of ammunition in the car. You made those choices and you parked there and you loaded. I mean, at some point he loaded his gun. We don't know when, but it was loaded before he ran down the ramp. So you made that decision to do that, knowing that, again, like the victims don't know you're coming.
Right.
You can say, oh, I was, arming myself for, self-defense or because I was, living in a hotel or the reasons that he gave. But it's like you don't go into an apartment where no one knows you're coming with a loaded gun and then get to claim later, oh, it was heat of passion. No, you had a plan. You followed through with your plan. You brought the loaded gun and you immediately fired it. And when someone fires a gun, I'm sorry if you're high or, having a manic episode or anything like that, you definitely know you did that. And he could have stopped because he may not have even struck them at that point. He may have hit the wall in the first shot. But then you decide again to keep walking towards your victims and you rack your gun again and you fire 4 more shots. You keep your finger on the trigger. So it was important to highlight all of those things that he did. And he kept making the conscious decision to do that.
Yeah, I thought that cross was great. And what really struck me about him overall, and it came out, I think, in cross and the way he answered questions, is how narcissistic he was. To video yourself in so many of these situations, but at the time, to video yourself during the murder, to take videos of your your violence towards your spouse. All of these things just suggest to me how narcissistic he was. And when I watched his answers, it was like so obvious to me that was a big piece of who he was. And I think that came across to the jury as well.
Right, it was. And even all of her friends and, family members, they saw that about him. And, I believe some of them testified to that. But that's who he was.
I really liked your closing. The cross was great, but I really enjoyed watching your closing. I wasn't there, obviously, but I got to watch it on court TV. And in my opinion, it was like a textbook premeditated murder closing, especially for a domestic violence case. I thought, you handled the law all very well. And then you went through systematically kind of what you did on cross, but with the jury of how this is premeditated and deliberated and the choices that he makes and the timeline in which all of this unfolds, which you kind of gave us a preview at the beginning. But I think the best part about your closing was, not that you're asking me, but was how you attacked voluntary manslaughter.
Yeah.
You attacked it head on, and you didn't wait for the defense to talk about it. You talked about it, and you said why it's not voluntary manslaughter, and you distinguished it from what when is a real voluntary manslaughter and when it isn't. And the fact that he planted a device and planned to kill and all the steps he took leading up to this showed that this was something that he thought about ahead of time, right? And something that he planned to do. And I think you didn't hold back. And I thought that was really, really effective in a closing for this type of a case.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent job. So yeah, when you're preparing a closing like that, you had the timeline, you're focusing on, sometimes these nuances get lost with the jury, and it's your job as a prosecutor to really highlight the importance. Like, for example, like the racking of the gun, the finding of the live bullets on the ground, indicating when he racked it, where he racked it, because as people that, if they don't know, on a semi-automatic pistol, you slide it. That's the racking. And if there's a bullet in the chamber, one will pop out. And that's what he was doing, which is what you argue to the jury. Hey, this is showing his decisions. It's showing he's intimidating his victims. He is processing and thinking.
Right. I mean, that was such a big piece of evidence for the case, was that there were 3 unspent bullets on the ground. And then later they found 2 more inside Anna's legs. But it was important for me to explain that to the jury because, he could say all he wants that he brought a gun just because he was carrying it all the time as a self-defense thing. And, he didn't know what he'd be walking into. He just wanted to catch them in bed together and take a photo or audio record it to show all of their family that she's with another man and has been lying about it. All of that is like what he said. But when you're going in with a gun already loaded, you already have the plan. And so when you're racking a gun that already has a bullet in the chamber, it pops out. And then you can hear that on the recording. So I was able to explain, and I highlighted that so many times because it was super important for premeditation.
Yeah, I think the jury fully grasped that. And that's why they came to a first degree murder. I mean, granted, you had an excellent defense attorney, Jody Green, who we've all probably had cases with her. She's smart. She's effective. She said, I want you to hold him accountable, but just for voluntary manslaughter. This was a crime of passion, and that could be very persuasive, but then you get to go up and have the final word because you have the burden of proof, and your rebuttal, just like your closing, was dynamite. You hit all the necessary issues. Rebuttal is something kind of odd because you're only responding to what they say. So you can't prepare too much ahead of time, but you seem ready to go to attack his credibility, attack this voluntary manslaughter. Did you have that planned ahead? Did you just respond to what the defense attorney was saying?
No, I had that planned ahead. I knew that I wanted to attack the voluntary manslaughter in my initial closing because I wanted the jury to hear not only why it was a premeditated first-degree murder for both victims, but why it wasn't manslaughter. So that when the defense got up, of course, they're going to say, yes, it is, and go through all that. But the jury's already heard that that's not what it is. And I made sure I did examples because it's hard to grasp all these things. So I made sure I told stories and gave examples of what, murder was, what manslaughter was, what it's not, like how quick you can make a decision, things like that. So I knew I wanted to put that all out there in my initial closing, but I knew that I would just highlight certain things that the defense, like certain defenses in my rebuttal. Mm-hmm. So I made sure I knew in advance that I was going to highlight the psychologist's testimony and why, even if he had a bipolar diagnosis, which was 2.5 years later after the murders, even if he had that diagnosis in the past, beforehand, it didn't affect his decision-making and the intent to kill the day of. And so I knew I was going to combat, I had a lot of things to combat, a lot of defenses, not only the heat of passion, but the mental impairment and the voluntary intoxication. So I saved those things for the rebuttal to make sure I just refocus them on, look, again, it's not heat of passion, but it's also not, the murder's not reduced from a first because he had bipolar disorder or he was high on cocaine at the time or because of his childhood trauma. So these were all defenses, and defense witnesses testified to all those things. So I just want to make sure in rebuttal I combated that and said, no, even if you believe he was bipolar before, he wasn't manic that day. You saw how lucid, articulate, he was having conversations. He followed directions. Like that's why I showed his arrest and his, interaction with the police. Like he wasn't stumbling. He wasn't slurring his words. He wasn't too high to have, formed the intent for murder. So I just made sure I highlighted that all of those things, all of those defenses were not actual defenses to first-degree murder and just brought them back again to, look, the biggest piece of evidence is that he went in with a loaded gun. Like you don't go into an apartment, no one knows you're coming to with a loaded gun unless your plan is to kill them. And you had already bugged the apartment. So you knew what you were going to walk in on. You knew for half hour or more that Anna was with someone in the apartment. So you had plenty of time to cool down and rethink about it. But no, that was your plan all along. Any man she was with was dead. And then so was she.
What an excellent verdict and congratulations on it. I imagine that there was a different flavor with the fact that it was so well covered by the news and court TV. Was there anything about the trial or how it was covered that surprised you or was hard?
I knew all along that the media was going to be in there every day and reporting on it. And I tried not to, look at that or read too much into it during the trial. I really just tried to focus on, look, they're not there. I'm just going to focus on my case, do the best job that I can do, be as prepared as possible, confident, like going in, knowing my case. And that's really all I could do. And of course, it's, nerve wracking when there's a lot of cameras in there and everything. But I really just made sure to just be me and be the attorney I was and just do my job and make sure that I put everything out there to get justice for the victims and families.
Yes, excellent. And you really brought it back home to what this case was about, a domestic violence case. And I thought your line in your rebuttal was very apt. You said, Anna was his property and Ray couldn't have her. And that's why he killed him. And that really sums it all up. And I think that was very persuasive to the jury. What was it like to get the verdict and be there with the victim's family who was there for every court proceeding and share with them the small bit of justice that we can achieve for them?
Of course, it was great. So devastating, just the whole case and having them, both families were very involved, obviously loved Anne and Ray, wanted to watch the trial, wanted to see justice done. And I had Microsoft Teams running for family who couldn't be there. And then, of course, a lot of family and friends were present every day. And, I wanted to make sure that I was a good source of support for them because I know it was so difficult. I played a lot of audio recordings and videos of devastating, conduct, their loved ones being killed. I mean, it was recorded. And so it was really hard to hear. So as much as I tried not to play those things too much, you had to. And so I know I told them about that in advance. And I said, this is what I'm showing today. These are the photos I'm showing. These are the recordings. If you feel like you can't be there, that's up to you. But they all just wanted to hear it and hear the entire thing and be there. So, of course, I was so relieved when they came back with the first-degree murder verdicts because it was important to get 2 firsts, or at least a first and a second, because that's what makes the case life without parole. And it was important, and that's what the families wanted. And they wanted him to spend the rest of his life in prison. So I wanted to make sure that I got that for them. So,
and that's what he got. But the judge said technically he could reduce it on his own, but felt and kind of parroted a lot of arguments you made that this killing was absolutely worthy of the sentence that he got, which was life without the possibility of parole. Excellent job.
Thank you.
Well, Taryn, we like to cut the tension a little bit about serious topics and switch to a little game we call Crime or Fiction, where each episode we look at the laws on the books where 2 are real, 1 is fake, and you have to guess which one is the fake. I know you're a huge fan of the podcast, Taryn. I know you've listened to every episode, so you know how this goes. And there's no theme. It's just these are all California Penal Code sections. Are you ready, Lori?
No.
Okay. Lori always gets it right.
No, I don't know. I was on a roll, and then I always end up going downhill.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Here we go in no particular order. Penal Code Section 538A. It's illegal to send a letter to the editor in another person's name with the intent to lead the newspaper to believe that such letter was written by that person. B. Penal Code Section 538B. It's illegal to wear insignia of a secret society with the intent to deceive and intent to obtain aid within the state. C. 538C. It's illegal to post on social media in another person's name with the intent to cause social retribution to that person. These are 3 laws. 2 are real, but you have to find which one is the fake. Taryn, since you are our guest, I will ask you to go first. Let me know your thoughts.
I've prosecuted all of these crimes. Let's see. The letter to the editor, that's illegal. Secret society probably as well. I've never seen the social media law. So I think I'm going to go with C.
C.
And probably because this is a social media case, you might have tried to throw me off with that. So
Interesting. C. It's illegal to post on a social media in another person's name with the intent to cause social retribution to that person. Okay. And so you have prosecuted the other ones. Good to know. Lori, what is your thought?
These are all new to me. We don't see many letter to the editor crimes anymore. Let me just say that.
You're not part of the letter to the editor division of the San Diego DA's office?
I have never been, but I feel okay about it. I'm gonna side with Taryn on this. I think she's right.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with C.
Both of you say C. All right. Let's start with A. It's illegal to send a letter to the editor in another person's name with the intent to lead the newspaper to believe that such letter was written by that person. How many people are doing this where they have to pass a law, 538A? You both think this one is real, and this one is real. It is Penal Code Section 538A, where every person who signs any letter addressed to a newspaper with the name of a person other than themselves with the intent to lead them is guilty of a misdemeanor. So
let it be a lesson to y'all out there.
There you go.
Don't do it.
I'm gonna test that and sign it from Lori Hoff.
Don't do it.
We'll get you, Jorge.
We'll get you.
538A. So 538B, it says it's illegal to wear insignia of a secret society with the intent to deceive and intent to obtain aid within the state. You both think this is real? Really?
It sounds like it should be. It sounds like it should be. I mean, I've never seen it.
Why would it be Anyways, this one is real. And so to me, it's crazy that you could wear insignia of a secret society to try to get aid. And that is a crime. It says anyone who willfully wears the badge, lapel, button, rosette on any part of the garb, robe, habit, or any other recognized and established insignia and apparel of any secret society to obtain and deceive aid. What is that? It's guilty of a misdemeanor. So don't worry about that, Lori. You could wear your rosettes all you want.
Phew. I have so many.
I mean, see, it is fake. Good job. You're right. I must have been thinking of social media because of this case. So good job. You both sniffed it out. You know your penal code.
Thank you.
Well, that was fun.
Now I have to look up whether we've prosecuted anyone for the
How many people?
One person who wore a secret society insignia.
Exactly. Just don't do that in California if you're ever visiting anyone that's listening to this. Well, Taryn Brast, you are a phenomenal prosecutor. Anyone who's a listener who is thinking about being a lawyer, go and watch this cross-examination. Go and watch this closing argument because you did an excellent job. You never took the bait of the defendant, you know, when he was asking you questions, when he was asking you to show him exhibits, and you were always asking leading questions unless it was, you know, perfect for the not to. So excellent job. I just want to congratulate you and thank you for achieving justice for the victims.
Thank you. I also just wanted to highlight, obviously, it wasn't just me. It was mainly, you know, the San Diego Police Department and all the phenomenal work they did to gather all the evidence for this case and the work of investigators and staff in my office. Just really, obviously, we're all a team, and it was great teamwork by everybody to get these convictions. And it's just one important thing I just want to put out there is that we know how hard it is to report domestic violence and for victims to come forward or family or friends to come forward. But it is really important because, you know, the more that domestic violence is reported, the more power that's taken away from the abuser. In addition to getting restraining orders means you can't have a gun. So, you know, if there was more reporting of domestic violence, more guns taken away from these abusers, then we'll just make our world a safer place. So I just wanted to highlight that, you know, don't be afraid to report domestic violence, and victims shouldn't be afraid to come forward.
Thank you. Yes, we will put a link in the show notes for some of the hotlines, how to report domestic violence. And we'll put a link in the show notes too for the Court TV. It's on YouTube, but we'll put a direct link. Taryn Brast, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's always great to see you both.
Thank you. And Lori, thank you as well. Thank you. It's always nice to see you.
Nice to see you. It was a great show.
Thank you. And for all our listeners out there, remember to follow us on social media and leave a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, this is the Crime News Insider Podcast. Solely of the speakers do not reflect the views of the Deputy DA Association nor the District Attorney. Questions and comments can be sent to crimenewsinsider@gmail.com. Please leave a rating and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this show. Remember to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @SanDiegoDDAs. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.